Hi, well, I'm just getting ready to go up and look at the air show, and we've got a packed 50-minute spectacular for you, I promise. We've got the big American A-10 Thunderbolt tank busters, we've got the Martini Patrol for manoeuvres, we've got the Skyhawks with fabulous acrobatics, we've got helicopters, we've got this plane, the Boeing Stearman for wing walking, with a much prettier cargo in the actual show. We've got triplanes, so stay around and watch. Meanwhile, I'm going to try and pluck up the courage.
I work with 𝐖𝐀𝐍𝐓, and he simply doesn't have the bottle. But while he's summoning up the courage, I'll be keeping my feet very firmly planted on the ground. I'll be speaking to some of the pilots, amongst them Gary Newman, pop star and now aerobatic pilot extraordinaire. Look out, I don't believe it. Robin Bowes, you own the only Fokker triplane now in existence. Where on earth did you come across the aircraft?
Well, I wasn't clever enough to actually build it myself, Ruth, but it was built by an engineering company down in the far end of Cornwall in southwest England. They built it from the original plans. Small correction, it's not the only one in existence. There are 2 or 3 other replicas, but unfortunately there's no originals left. The last known original was destroyed in the Second World War when a museum in Berlin was flattened. But this one's proved a pretty popular airplane, going around lots of air shows.
Triplane is ready to roll. Triplane, roger. Clear takeoff, runway 22, surface wind 270, 20 knots.
Well, what a way to start the show. This is the 1918 Fokker DR1 triplane. It's flown here by Robin Bowes, and Robin has flown this plane all the way to Northern Ireland from Cornwall. It's a splendid plane. The actual Fokker triplanes were first tested and flown around August 1917. It's known as the Dreidecker in German, or triplane. Believe it or not, the Germans copied this design from what they thought was the very agile British Swabbeth Camel, or triplane should I say. It's something the German believed had splendid and inherent qualities. Turned out they weren't really right or wrong, but nevertheless it's left us with this rather beautiful plane. Now this isn't an original Fokker. In fact, it was built down in Cornwall. Robin bought it around about 1980, found it lying in a barn, would you believe? He now flies it more or less for a living. In the winter it stays in the Fleet Air Arm Museum, and obviously a plane like this needs an awful lot of attention. This plane does not like crosswinds. Also, it can't be steered when it's on tarmac or concrete, and you have to run alongside pushing the wings round. Not actually the pilot doing, of course, somebody else has to help him. Of course, very much associated with the First World War, and of course the famous Red Baron, Baron Manfred von Richthofen. It actually arrived very late in the day, so to speak, in the war. In fact, as I say, August 1917. By then, the Baron had shot down 60 planes. and he only used this to shoot down just 20 more. But the plane made a very major impact because in its first 4 weeks, one pilot used it to shoot down 21 Allied planes. Robin gracefully tumbling the plane down towards the ground and then flattening out and coming right towards our camera. Beautiful sight to watch.
Triplane, clear to land, 27020. Further wind checks on final, no need to acknowledge.
Let's watch him come down. He'll be hanging out over the side of the plane, looking through that gap. You can just see him looking out to his left as he comes down, trying to gauge it. He will land on the grass because he can't steer the plane on tarmac. He's a tiny little skit at the back. And once the plane lands and loses airspeed, it's almost impossible to steer. A fairly elegant landing, given the very strong winds. Robin Bowes. Well, here's a man who wouldn't welcome a conversation with you just at the minute. Jeff Salter, who's the show organiser. He's practically lived in his control tower. Now watch this plane. This is the German Fighter Stork. As you can see, it's taken off. That plane took off, I can tell you, there at about 60 yards. It's an amazing plane. It's one of those things that makes you actually say, is it a plane, is it a bird, or is it a pair of curtains? Now this one is a plane, I can assure you. You can see those long hanging wheels on the struts. It is German. It's called the Storch in German, which is German for stork, because it looks so much like a flying bird. From the Fiesler factory, it goes all the way back to the start of the Second World War. The plane, as a Mark, first flew in 1936, built very much to fill the demand for an all-terrain plane. It's a noisy one, this one. It could operate very much in the battlefield areas. Look, it's still over the runway, and it's climbed up now to 200 or 300 feet. Obviously not a very powerful plane. It really relied on its maneuverability. Not only can it take off in just a few dozen yards, it can land on still days in just 28 yards. You could land this plane in a reasonable sized back garden. You wouldn't be very popular, but you could do it. Now, flat out, it can manage a phenomenal, well, just 109 miles an hour, to be honest. Not very fast, but speed was not the key to it. It really was the fact that as you look at it now, it's just barely covering the ground. That can be very important for two reasons. First of all, when you're flying that slow, you can take photographs, fly over trenches, fly over gun emplacements, and get a lot of reconnaissance. You can land on the sides of mountains, and it was one of these planes that snatched Mussolini away from a place that he was trapped in, almost on the side of a mountain. Look at that for speed. You would think this plane is sort of coming down to land. In fact, it's all but hovering because of the very strong wind. In line with the RAF Austers that were used in the Second World War. And I can tell you that it's not widely known that when the war ended, the Allied forces, of course, confiscated a lot of these planes. They examined them very carefully and discovered that, in fact, in many ways, they were far superior to the Auster. But strangely enough, they fell out of use. And although some of them lasted into the 50s for doing general work, they really ended up in museums and one or two places. The plane we're watching was built in France under license during the war for the Germans, if you can call a country that's been invaded under license, but that's the case. At the time, the Feisler factory where they would have been built in Germany was being used to do something else, and indeed a production line had been set up where these planes were once built for the Feisler V1 flying bomb. Yes, despite its old ship, the man who designed this also designed the V1 flying bomb. And the plane you're looking at today is on show in its Luftwaffe colours. And how's that for a landing? You could almost have stepped out the moment it touched the ground. And then watch this again. He could simply take off, just like that. Had it been windier, he probably wouldn't have even had to move forward, just throw the plane in the air. Watch it coming down. Watch the suspension if it touches. See how it splays out and absorbs all the shock? Delightful plane, it's now down. And again, very manoeuvrable on the ground, which it has to be able to turn around and get away very quickly. Very often it would land at almost at the speed the passenger would jump in. The plane could turn around just like that, point back into the wind, and ready to take off again.
Barry Tempest, you're in your 30th year of airshow displays. How did it all start?
Back in 1959 with glider aerobatics, and then progressed through the whole spectrum of airshow flying over the about something over 2,200 displays now.
Do you always display the Super Stearman?
No, everything from a jet provost to a little French aeroplane called the 𝐘𝐿_𝐄𝐒 with two 13 horsepower lawnmower engines on.
Bryony, we see you today wing walking. Perhaps you'd talk us through your display.
Well, the display today is going to be a little bit interesting. We start off, I think, a tiny little bit tamely. You take off and wave and all the rest of it, fly around, do a few circuits, and then the excitement really begins, because we'll be looping the loop, and I'll be giving you a wave when I'm upside down, so look out for that. It's going to be fun. And at various stages, I'll take my feet out of the straps and wave my arms around and just generally have a good time.
Well, I suppose this one isn't so much about the plane as the passenger, because it really is standing room only here. Look at that. This is the Boeing Super Stearman flown by Barry Tempest. But what about Bryony Christopher? She's the one on top of the wings waving at us now. I can tell you that having done this myself, well, your heart is in your mouth. As the plane takes off and banks either left or right, you begin to wonder, what am I doing up here? It was possibly the most frightening minute and a half I've ever faced on this earth. She makes it look very easy. Well done, Bryony, but it is very frightening. I can tell you she's very, very, very well strapped in. You can see her feet in those special harnesses. It's on a steel frame bolted to the wing. And once you get used to the tremendous surge of air over that wing, he's flying around now, perhaps with the wind, not just as bad, but when he turns into the wind, and the total wind of the plane is around about 100 to 120 knots. It is very hard to do what Bryony is doing now. You can't just put your hand up and wave. You've got to really push your hand forward and work very hard at it. I got a lot of instructions on it, found it very difficult to do. The plane is called Boeing Super Stearman. It's got a 450 horsepower Pratt & Whitney engine. That was built way back in the 1930s, of course. It has that look and was an American, if you like, all-purpose trainer plane. It's a very heavy use during the Second World War again to train pilots who eventually would graduate to a monowing. A lot of admiration for this girl, Bryony, because when she's not doing this, she relaxes with free fall parachute. I mean, she's really asking for it. She enjoys every moment of this, and when she gets the chance, she'll travel around to the air shows. So just taking all her weight on her right foot as the plane banks, throws you very heavily onto the wing. The plane climbs for, yes, you've guessed it, rolls right over it. She's still on the wings and waving. And there it is, climbing up and twisting right round and coming down. And I can assure you, it would take more than a promise of a considerable pension to have me up doing that specific sort of stunt. And there's more to come, because she goes right upside down and still waving. Quite amazing. When the plane comes out of that climb very fast, the air pressure against her is probably getting on for about 150 knots of wind. That's getting on for 3 hurricanes, if you like. It is a tremendous stress on the body. Your face is pushed right in. Your cheeks actually start to flap. You have to keep your mouth tightly closed, because when you open it, it sort of fills with most of the air that's passing you, and instantly your mouth dries out and it's very hard to get your lips closed over your teeth again. It might seem important now, but when you're up there, it's all you're thinking about. You'll notice with Brownie waves, when she finishes waving, she brings her arms down in towards her body. She can't just let them go, otherwise they quite literally blow behind her, and that can be very sore. Coming into land now, and as the plane touches down, a very gentle landing, and she's finished. What a brave lady. Imagine doing that for a living. She doesn't quite, but she does the next best thing. Brownie Christopher and Barry Tempest. Well, this delightful green and white thing we see hopping in front of us is the Pitts S2. Not a lot to say about it, just watch this. We are flying upside down. I assure you the smoke is deliberate, he hasn't a problem. The design of this plane, it's a very small plane too, because all the way back to the period really 1943-44 when it was designed as a trainer and then became an acrobatic plane. It used to be a 2-seater, but the pilot's been moved back to give the plane more balance, and it's now a single-seater. And the pilot abusing the plane today is David Heather Hayes. When he's not doing this, he's a CAA examiner, and that's with the Civil Aviation Authority. The problem when you do a roll like that is actually coming out of it and having the orientation quite correct. And these guys don't fly by instruments when they're doing that, they really do fly by the feel of it. He's got a little 200 horsepower, did I say little? 200 horsepower engine. It's an 𝐓𝐀𝐏𝐄𝐒 engine for the technically minded. Incidentally, if you like the little plane, well, I can tell you can actually still buy this plane as a kit today. That'll keep you busy in the garage over the winter. It's the flying it, I think, is the difficult bit. Climbing vertically now and turning again as the plane almost comes to a stop, and then diving, pulling several G. When I say G, incidentally, I'm talking about the number of times gravity that your plane, a tremendous G just pushing him into this cockpit there, incidentally, as it did that sort of slide forward. Your body takes on several times its own weight, and in the faster planes, the pilots actually have to wear a special belt to stop their insides moving about. Now, I know you're having a lunch perhaps, so I won't talk too much about it. I hope it's a light lunch you're having today. Ooh. Again, almost as far as the plane can go, and then straight down, picking up to maximum speed before flattening out and getting ready. How's that for a pass? He's got to judge that by eye, just to come within about really 50 feet of the tarmac. Again, flying straight upside down. Maybe checked his harness before he got in. Rolling it round. Climbing vertically until it almost loses its grip, and then coming down at high speed, ready to perform the next manoeuvre. It may look as if he's just throwing it around the sky any old how, but I can assure you these manoeuvres not only have to be planned, but they have to fly along what is the datum line, and that is really a line down the centre of the runway, and that's very largely for safety reasons, though it does help the pilots position their plane when they're coming out of a dive or a roll. They've got something visual that they can fasten their eye onto, because sometimes these planes don't have an artificial horizon. And really, when they come out of a roll, it's their eyes that tell them initially which way they're facing. And if you've done several rolls and are feeling rather dizzy because of G-forces, it can do funny things to your imagination. You can see the plane flying right down the datum line now as it comes down towards the tarmac. You see it flying sideways. It shows you how much wind there is pushing that plane along, and as they come down to land, they've got to really get themselves sorted out. And well, what can I say, a very nice landing, but then a very nice piece of flying by David Heatherhayes in the PITS S2.
It's Delta Whiskey 180 to backtrack for fuel. Martini team, follow the backtracking PITS S2 to line up 22. Order for the pits.
How many shows would you say you did each year?
Between 100 and 120 every year in 10 countries in Europe every season.
What do you do for the final minutes leading up to the display? Do you have a meeting with your partners?
Yes, we try to get some concentration, and we have a small meeting briefing to take care about the specific conditions of the day. The wind, for example, today the wind is quite strong from the south, and we have to take some delay between maneuvers for the synchronization of the sequence. So we speak about that. Also the display axis, take care about the distance from the crowd, and that's it.
This is the famous International Martini Patrol. They are just simply high-performance planes. The pilots are superb. They fly with such precision that at times, although the wingtips are meant to be 6 feet apart, when we were watching them coming in sometimes in rehearsal, I can tell you the wings were less than 6 inches apart. And even then, the planes were rolling and turning in flight with the most amazing ease. 3 French pilots up there working away: Jacques Bohlen, Jean-Louis Giordano, and 𝐘𝐿_H_Varin, and they spend the summer flying these planes. They have a horrible time in the winter when the planes are away getting service. They go off and ski and things like that, but such is the life of an acrobatic or aerobatic pilot. The planes at the minute are now circling around, getting ready to group, build up their height and their speed, and then I'll let you watch what they do. It is quite amazing. The planes, incidentally, are Pilatus PC-7 turbo planes of Swiss manufacture, and they're very much in the market, same market lead as the short Tucano trainer.
Much more than any racing driver has to contend with. There we go, smoke on. Pulling up this beautiful formation. Lovely formation move. Looking as if they're almost tied together with a rope. Absolutely beautiful formation flying. Building up, tight turn. Fantastic down.
And the planes fly with great precision. You'll notice that even as they come down in the buffeting close to the ground, they hold perfect formation, and in those dives they pull the plane's maximum allowed. That's 6G. And that, believe you me, forces you right down into the seat. And when they climb and then loop over at the top, they have negative G. That means your body becomes 3 times less heavy than gravity, and you have to be held in your seat. And it's not a good idea to have a heavy lunch before you do this.
They really do get around the fly very, very quickly. Wow, pulling right level up at about 6 G's there, 5
This is also a very difficult stunt. As you can see, the outside plane has just flown around the others, about to do so again. Now, this requires a lot of synchronous flying, because as he flies, he's got to keep a slightly faster speed than the other two planes, because of course he's inscribing a huge arc around them. They've got to fly fairly constantly and fairly static. And again, the precision and timing involved in that sort of flying, well, it's hundreds of hours of practice. And I can tell you that after every 100 hours in the air, these planes are taken back to the factory and given a very strenuous examination. Planes coming low there over the Arch Peninsula. You can see really Belfast Lock there, you see in the distance. It's very warm up there, and with the sun. I'm told air conditioning is an option on these planes. I imagine it's not fitted to this particular plane because it might get in the way of the aerobatics. You can't have these chaps staying too cool.
Did you suddenly decide one day, waking up over your cornflakes, you know, yeah, time for a fly?
No, I'd been involved or interested in it since I was about 4 or 5 years old. I've always lived near London Airport, I suppose, so I've always been around them. I'm fascinated by them as a youngster. And it went on from there. I used to go to air shows with my dad, used to go to the airport with my dad and get numbers. So I got into actually going to air displays like this when I was very young. And all those pilots are my heroes, you know, like Ray Hanna and people like that. And then I started, what did I do then? Then I joined the Air Training Corps when I was 13 and got involved with it. But that was dreadful because I was in that for a year. I flew once, one little 15-minute trip in a chipmunk. It was more like a photography club. I could have been in the Scouts for that. So I wasn't into that too much. And then it was quite a while actually. And after that I got involved in the music thing, and the flying became very much just a hobby. I went to airfields at weekends and watched. And it wasn't till I was about 20 or so that I actually started taking lessons. And then it really took off, obviously. Yeah.
Well, just passing below Scrabble there, taking off what looks like a Japanese Zero, is in fact the Harvard of Gary Newman. Yes, Gary Newman, the musician. Let Gary himself take us through what happens in the next few minutes. Hold on to your armchairs.
The maximum speed limit of the aeroplane is 259 miles an hour. For the first run-in, we're going for a thing called a reverse half Cuban. We get up to about 250. So we're just a tad below the absolute maximum speed we can do. Well, they reckon the wings have come off, but it doesn't, because I've been past it. About a 4G pull, 60 degrees nose up, wait for 120 miles an hour, roll inverted, come over the top, all the way back down again, coming up to about 230 miles an hour to go into a loop. As you come over the top of the loop, pointing straight back down to the ground again, we roll 90 degrees left and go away from the crowd, looking for a minimum of 200 miles an hour, preferably 220, and not below 500 feet. legally. Pull up, roll inverted, stop it inverted, hold it for about 2 seconds. That's the most you can do before the engine stops, as I say. Right way up again, another wing over, then a low run, pull up, brake, gear down, and land. That's it.
Very difficult manoeuvre, ladies and gentlemen. As you saw, as you went over the roll, the wheels came down. Well done, Gary. Beautiful flying. I'll give him a round.
There you are, Gary Newman. I could not have put it better myself. Well, this is going to be one of the classics of the show. It is, well, could you not recognise it, the de Havilland Mosquito, one of the most famous planes of the Second World War, and one which I know brings a lot of nostalgic memories back to those who served with the RAF during that period. This plane won't be flown very hard because it goes all the way back to 1945. In fact, this plane was bought for just £100 and saved from the scrap heap, and I can tell you it is the only known Mosquito in existence flying in the UK. Estimated value around about £500,000 if you were able to buy one. It's been flown today by Tony Craig. It's owned and looked after by British Aerospace. They first became operational in the war in 1941. Now, they weren't something that the War Department had asked for. To have them built it secretly, because when initially they told the War Department about this twin-engine fighter bomber, they said, no thank you, we're working on something else. It was built quietly. It was demonstrated to the War Department, its maneuverability, the fact it could carry up to 25,000 pounds of bombs, could carry cannons and machine guns, 2 cannons, 4 machine guns in the nose. It could do quite a lot of damage. When the War Department saw it in action, they thought, we'll have one. And indeed, as I said, they had 7,000 before it was all over. So here we see RR299 flown by Tony Craig after a fairly splendid display.
Air 4 is 3 miles out for the high-speed test. Roger 94, that is approved.
Well, did they look like planes to you? They certainly didn't to me. Those are quite amazing things. Somebody described them to me as 2 engines with guns in the middle and a bit of a wing on either end. Those are the American A-10 Thunderbolt. Some people call them the Warthogs because of the rather ugly looks, but certainly they're known in the trade as the Tank Busters because that's what they're designed to do, and they do it very well. Basically, they like to shoot up tanks. Now, these planes have to fly and circle around about 400 miles an hour in very grey skies, and at the minute in pouring rain, which, if you can imagine that blasting against the plane's windscreen, must make their life very difficult. But of course, to be realistic, it could very well be in a theatre of war, they might be fighting in the same conditions. Now, don't let me leave you with the impression that these things only go flat out. There's one, you can see the profile, a rather ghastly looking thing. Those pods sitting either side just behind the wings are vast engines, and really that's all it is: a pilot, a wing, two engines, the tailplane. And just under the wings, we'll see it in closer detail in a few seconds, it's a big Gatling gun. Yes, I did say Gatling gun, because that's what the plane does. It's got a Gatling gun that can basically take out tanks every few seconds. The pilot sits in a titanium bathtub. Well, that's what they call it in the trade. It's titanium, it's armoured plated, in other words, and it's said that the pilot can be hit by a 37mm shell. Well, rather the bathtub, I suppose I should say, could be hit by a 37mm shell and not be pierced. I'll take their word for it. You can see the plane now coming towards us with its flaps down, air dams up, its wheels down, flying very, very slowly indeed, and still very steady and manoeuvrable in the air. And look at those two vast engines at the back. Now, the plane's got a must not exceed speed of 480 miles an hour. There's a lovely side shot of the plane flying low and smooth. But look how low it is and how slow it is for a jet. That is the very important part of these jets, that they can fly so stable, because they can just basically hang about.
License 941, you're well clear of the circuit. You're cleared to set course to the southwest. Thanks very much for all your assistance, and back to harbour on 130.85. Have a good trip.
Roger that. License 94, let's go 130.85.
Well, here's one of the problems of running an air show, of course. You're very much in the hands of the weather gods. But as I say in the film MASH, your incoming aircraft, two helicopters and a plane, as you can see, Gazelle, a Lynx, and the new Islander that's being used by the Army Air Corps to replace the old Beaver. The Gazelle is the French Aerospatiale Gazelle, and it sees action in a lot of countries and used by a lot of NATO forces. It's a five-seater helicopter. Of course, in real life would be used with just two. If it was in action, you can see the strange aerial device at the front, all part of the crafty devices that are used to search out things like tanks and other aircraft, of course. The Gazelle climbing almost near vertically and then right nose down, coming in very fast. Rather daunting if you're sitting or standing below it watching. And then a very healthy rate of climb again. Look at that climbing away from us. Well, this is the Britain Normander BN2T turbine Islander, or the Islander as people know it generally. It's going to be seen around Northern Ireland a lot more because it's replacing the rather elderly Army Beaver that's been flying in the skies of late. It's very much an old metal plane, this, not the old stick and canvas of the previous planes. It's actually used, as the name would suggest, flying people around amongst islands. If you're flying up around the Shetlands or the Orkneys, you might very well go between the islands in this. It's a 10-seater, and I can remember a few years ago flying up there, and everybody getting on board had to be weighed to make sure that there weren't too many people who were too hefty getting on at once. But that really underwrites the plane. It's called a stall plane, short takeoff and landing, and it really can work very easy. See with the flaps down, coming down now, and it can fly quite slowly, I can tell you. Well, this device coming towards us is, I don't need to tell you, another helicopter, another one you'll see in the skies over Northern Ireland. It's the Lynx, and it's one of the Anglo-French agreement helicopters. In other words, it's a joint production, and really the pedigree goes right back to 1967, so it's about, what, 20 years old now.
After a steep climb, flanking over tight, this is
Again, not very fast. Speed is not all that important. Big doors you can see at the side of the helicopters. These are very much working vehicles to get people and loads in and out of very quickly. And again, you see the exhausts from the engines split this time, being fed out over the tailplane at the rear, and the wing, if you like, sticking out to one side, that gives the helicopter stability and enables it to maneuver. The rotor blade there is really what, if you like, is pushing the helicopter from side to side. The helicopter bound to the cameras. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And flying out backwards, how's that for maneuverability? And with that, he turns and departs back to Aldergrove, and that can mean only one thing. Next, crossing the skies of Newtownards, it's something we've been keeping up our sleeve. It's an RAF Hawk. But if you're trying to work out what this plane is, imagine it with 9 others performing remarkable precision flying. This is the British Aerospace Hawk. It's exactly the same variety as you would see with the Red Arrows. The plane we're watching is from RAF Valley in North Wales and is flown here by Flight Lieutenant Tim Frost, and he's just 25, not bad for 25. I'm glad to see he's flying it gently today, because it's no slouch to this jet. It can fly faster than sound at Mach 1.2, and that would break all the windows about here. Has a range of 1,000 miles, and that's pretty amazing for such a small plane that can fly so fast and so powerfully. He's climbing at the minute. There's something else he's got to watch. The shuttle passing overhead must be wondering what on earth is going on here. Pops into the cloud, and way below that somewhere is our Hawk. Now, as it climbs and turns, I can tell you, as he's coming down now and pulls out, he will pull 8 Gs in that turn. And that's pretty amazing just doing that. And in case you think there's always smoke coming from the wingtips, I can assure you that the plane is turning so fast in the moist air that's above us, is causing vortices in the air. And what we see there is steam and condensation being created just by the wing passing through the air. Beautiful looking plane. There he is, disappearing into the clouds and heading off back to his base in England. He's got a long, maybe hour's flight ahead of him. Now then, this is a Russian acrobatic plane. It's called 𝐘𝐿-50, and it's the only one of its type in the West. Richard Good, one of the people who bought it, has a very interesting story to tell, because when he went to buy it and said to the Russian embassy, "I'd like to buy your plane," he found MI5 on his doorstep saying what he was trying to do, buying Russian planes privately. As stunt planes go, it's very big, but it does what it does very well. Look at that beautiful curve, beautifully under par. 400 horsepower Russian engine, 10 litres. It has a never exceed speed of 420 miles an hour, making it actually, believe it or not, one of the fastest planes you will see today. Watch him climb vertically till he can get no higher. He's hanging on his prop. He stalls almost on his prop, bends it round and comes back down again by slipping sideways.
Richard Good was asked to fly this particular aircraft. The flight was having an abundance of power.
And up to his maximum speed, flattening out, half roll, upside down, again above the ground. A very tricky manoeuvre because you are just above the ground doing it. Trying to remember exactly where you are. Now, this plane has fabulous instrumentation, unlike most of the other aerobatic planes. This actually has lots of gyro equipment that will always tell the pilot which way up the plane is, and I'm told it makes it easy to actually fly. Again, the plane rolling right through. Despite what you see here, I understand from the pilot that he's only flying the plane to about 85% of both it and the engine ability. Makes it last longer. There's the plane going up as high as it can, starting to spin round and come out again and come down. And what is actually happening there is he's losing so much speed, the plane almost stops in the air, just hanging on the propeller. The reason that Richard Good bought the plane was that it was winning so many competitions. Every time the Russians entered something with the planes, they always won. It's an all-metal plane, actually very heavy, so it needs that extra power to fly, but a very strong plane. Richard says a lot in reserve. But certainly one of the biggest acrobatic planes here today.
He's doing a downwind approach there. He's coming into land very shortly, gear down, coming into land, and he's actually doing a downwind upside down, just to show the flexibility for him.
Richard coming now towards the end of his display with the wheels down. Well, this is, I promise you, a really delightful aerobatic team we're just about to watch. 3 planes, although you could actually be forgiven for thinking that they're actually gliders. Just look at them, don't they look very much like gliders? Well, that's because they are gliders. They're actually French planes, Fournier RF4s, timber-built glider. They're powered, though, by an engine. In this case, I think rather adequate, given the sponsors of the show. It's a Volkswagen Beetle 1200cc engine, which gives these little devils a maximum speed of 160 miles an hour and allows them to climb at 500 feet a minute, which is not bad for a glider. Now then, here's something that might have put the wind up you a few years ago. This, I imagine, is what the skies must have looked like over Pearl Harbor in the 1940s when the Japanese Zeros came in. These are not Japanese Zeros, in fact they're known as Harvards. This is the Harvard display team. But one of the planes, Gary Newman's, which we saw earlier, the one to the extreme right, is painted. There it is. That's almost identical to a Japanese Zero. This is 4 of the 6 Harvard display team, and every time they get in the air, I can tell you in our display, they end up fighting with each other because that's part of the trademark. Gary, as you see, peels off. He will come back, but unfortunately he comes back attacking the other 3, and we end up with a rather interesting little dogfight just above Newtownards. All 4 planes are actually Second World War planes. And here's Mr. Newman about to misbehave himself, coming in to attack out of what sun there was. Imagine finding him in your rear view mirror as you fly along. With the smoke flares, indicates that he has been hit. That's 1 down, just 2 to go. Will they get him before he gets them? Again, Gary Newman spotted his target. They spotted him. There you are, a bit of crafty flying by Gary. climbed steeper and tighter and got behind him. And as the old song goes, another one bites the dust. Will Mr. Newman make it, or will he live to fight another day? He's been got. Again, another excellent display from the Harvard team. That dogfight has to be choreographed. They just don't go up and do it, as you might imagine. It's got to be worked out fairly finely. And the end of it, I suppose it always ends the same way. It's rather unfortunate for poor Mr. Newman. The British plane always seems to win, but then that's the way it should be, I suppose. Well, the planes that we're looking at now haven't had too far to travel. They've come up from Baldonnel in the south of Ireland. They are the Silver Swallows, an acrobatic team from the Air Corps in the south, and they're flying for 𝐘𝐿𝐏. They use them for training down there. All 4 pilots are in fact instructors, and have set up this particular flying formation just in the last 3 years. And it really brings the show here to an end in a rather splendid way, because what they do very well indeed. Just watch this. Planes flying through, very identifiable by that deep V tail plane as they do a wing over port turn, flying around in perfect formation, almost touching, quite splendid. Under the command, the team leader is Captain Kevin Barry. I say all 4 flying instructors in the south of Ireland. Coming down, pulling 4G, climbing up to do a loop. Top of the loop, they will pull 4G again, but as they come out, they go right down to -1G. The little 2-seater light jets, I suppose you might call them, but they can be used for military purposes, and they can carry light machine guns and certainly carry rockets under the wings. Again, turning around neatly in formation despite having done that roll. Climbing to get the height, and then swooping down to make this next maneuver. Now then, the thing is, the planes join up, but they just don't meet again in one group. They fly past each other at a closing speed of 600 to 700 knots in what is known as an opposition loop. And it's quite interesting. I imagine if you're sitting inside the plane, it'd be even more interesting. As they pass and loop away just feet from our commentary position, it's time for us at Newtownards to say good afternoon to you. I hope you've enjoyed the coverage. So from me, Mike McKim and Ruth Jim and everybody here at Newtownards, a very good afternoon.